Hello, chefs. This is Chef's PSA podcast. I'm your host, André Natera. On today's episode, we have Travis Petersen, also known as the Cannabis Chef. He travels all over doing pop-ups, cooking with cannabis. It's a fascinating conversation. We're going to get into the business aspects of having your own traveling pop-up restaurant, as well as a deep dive into what it's like and what's really important about cooking with cannabis, especially to make sure no one has a bad experience. I think you'll enjoy this episode. Stay tuned. Chef, it's good to see you.
You as well. Thanks for having me.
I love the shirt.
Thank you very much.
I think that might have been my first introduction to becoming a chef, was watching that guy when I was a kid.
Yeah.
What does it say?
Vert de Ferk.
Yeah. What's his name? Is it the Swedish chef?
It's the Swedish chef.
The Swedish chef, yeah.
I'm Danish, so I always had that sort of joke kind of made because I'm a little messy in the kitchen sometimes, right?
So before we start the episode, I do a little bit of an introduction.
Yeah.
But I don't think my introduction is going to do justice to what you actually do, because it's very unique, and I'm really excited to have you on today because I don't know anything about what it is that you do. So I think our audience will really enjoy the conversation. So can you give like a high-level overview of what it is that you do?
Yeah. So I specialize in infused dining, and what does that mean? I'm a cannabis chef.
Yeah.
So I host multi-course dinners where we infuse and dose all of our guests individually based on their own tolerance level. And I'm kind of trying to break the perception of what people think edibles are as cookies, brownies, gummies. Mm-hmm. Now that America's moving into legalization, we've got more than half the states that allow recreationally. I think we're starting to kind of look at the plant in a different way and how we can incorporate it into food and then into dining.
And so you basically travel all over the United States.
All over the United States, Canada, and started doing Europe last year. So
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So much to unpack.
Yeah.
Let's start with the business side of this.
Yeah.
Because I'm very curious about how the business side of it works. I've never been a private catering chef. I've done maybe a handful of private caterings, but it's not something I ever claimed to be an expert on.
Yeah.
So for someone that's listening that wants to get into the private catering business, like what are some of the things like that someone needs to know when they begin, like, hey, consider this. These are some of the important things to consider when you start your business, and then also operationally.
Yeah, I think, when you're just starting out, there can be a lot of nervousness, right? Am I going to fail? First of all, don't ever be afraid of failing. Failing is only going to teach you lessons, right? So when I first started, I really leaned on friends, family to buy a ticket to that first dinner. I always said to people, buy one ticket, I'll never bug you again. But I really needed friends and family to come to those first couple dinners because it built my confidence up having a full room of people, right? The internet and social media has made this possible, which 20 years ago we couldn't have done. Without Instagram, I can't promote and sell my dinner tickets, which means I could never go to a city I've never been to before. Here in Austin right now, these were the first public dinners I did in Austin, and I put a post out on Instagram and we sold out all 36 seats in less than 2 days, right? So, it's kind of,
wow.
We're really in this new era where I'm doing everything on my own, right? And to get things started, you had to get over that fear of, can I do this?
Yeah, I want to ask about the ticket process. Do you use something like Talk, or how do you sell tickets? What platform do you use?
Yeah, so I'm actually moving to Open Table here in a couple of weeks. In the past, I was using Talk, and here's the biggest hurdle is that cannabis is still very much a gray space, especially with infused dining and that. So, I can't use traditional formats with open links. You can't just Google Nomad Cook dinner, find that city and buy a ticket. So I put an ad out there that I will run on Instagram for Austin saying I'm coming on these dates. You have to either comment or send me a DM to get the link for the event. That then creates the engagement for the post, which means more people see it.
Right.
That person will then message me. I give them the details on the dinner. If they want to go ahead, I send them a link. They purchase their tickets. I don't tell anyone where the dinner is. So we keep that private up until 2 days before.
And why is that?
Again, because we're operating in this gray space, right? We're pushing boundaries a little bit by hosting these dinners. So, I want to make sure we're keeping all of our guests safe, the privacy safe. It also, in my opinion, adds to the experience. It's a mystery dinner. Where are you going? I don't know where this is going to be.
Sure. Yeah.
We give them a general idea of, hey, it's going to be in this neighborhood.
Do people like the mystery? Just out of curiosity.
Most do. Some don't. Some don't understand.
Is there ever like, oh, you're like 45 minutes away from where I thought you might be?
Yeah, I mean, I always like a general area. I always give them a general area. This is where we're going to be at, right? So, but most people understand once you've come once, you get it, right? My goal doing this is to open the door for the next generation of chefs so they don't have to do this in an Airbnb. They can do it in a restaurant. They don't have to hide the location.
But for someone that's maybe not doing the cannabis thing, they're just doing private catering.
Right.
If you're giving someone advice in that space, you would say, build your following on social media, start showing people what it is that you're cooking. And then when you're doing your dinners, promote them on social media and also sell tickets on social media. Facebook ads or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And what are some of the things that you've learned? So you were again, I love the detailed tricks of the trade.
Yeah.
So you're talking about get people to comment. It drives engagement.
Yeah.
What are some of those other things that help bring awareness to what you're doing to fill the space?
Don't be afraid to give away some tickets to some influencers, connect with content creators. And then also ask people, I knew some people from Austin. I sent them a message before coming here. Hey, can you share my post? Someone said to me, I don't think anyone will do anything from it. I said, can you just share it? Mm-hmm. Last night at the dinner, someone said, I saw so-and-so made a post, so I bought a ticket. And I was like, great. You use as many different sort of avenues and angles to bring as much attention to what you're doing. And
when you started the private catering, did you start in one city and stay there, or did you immediately start traveling?
Yeah, so being from Western Canada, I'm from Vancouver, but I was living in Alberta when I started this whole sort of chef journey. So
like the Texas of Canada.
It is. It's North Texas, absolutely. Yeah. So there's two major cities in Alberta, Calgary, Edmonton, and then being from Vancouver, I had those three cities. So that was when the Nomad Cook concept was created. I was hoping one day I could get to Toronto, Montreal, right? Start in Western Canada. I had lived in all three cities. I knew them quite well. What I use for venues are Airbnbs. So I find an Airbnb, I reach out to that owner and say, hey, I'm a chef. I travel around. I'd like to host a dinner party in your house while I'm staying there from 6 till 8:30. I don't serve alcohol. I'm the only person sleeping in the house, or just me and my assistant. That is kind of how I get my venues. I mean, I have over 200 Airbnb reviews about a chef renting the house and, treating it with respect. So, building that up helps me now rent future houses. If people, want to look up and, who are you? What are you doing?
Right.
So, we will come into that house and, things I've learned over the years is, we travel I have an assistant that travels with me 90% of the time. So I have
a culinary assistant.
He's a culinary. He'd be my sous chef.
Yeah.
So he has 2 bags of luggage. I have 3. One's a cooler for me. One's a cooler for him. Mm-hmm. I travel with hotel pans and tools and, as I was kind of joking with you earlier, clothes that I'm going to wear are bottom of the list, right? Sometimes on long tours, I'll have the same thing being worn every day just because, I want to bring the right tools and equipment. I will rent plates and glassware, but I travel with cutlery.
So,
because cutlery is expensive to rent at $1 a piece, 5 pieces per person.
Yeah.
Right. So I think finding ways where you can save money. And then as well, doing a majority of your prep before you hit the road. So that's why we travel with 2 coolers. How much stuff can I get done ahead of time?
Yeah.
When I...
So do you backpack everything?
Yeah. And, most of the times I'm getting my proteins are, fresh, local, and just making sure sauces, garlic, toppings.
Anything that can be done ahead of time is done ahead of time.
Done ahead of time, right? Yeah. How can we save on time? Last November, we did 4 nights in a row where we went Richmond, Baltimore, New York, New Jersey. I left my assistant in Boston. I flew to London, England. I cooked a dinner there. 2 nights later, I flew back home. And then we did Boston, Providence, Princeton. So that was 9 dinners in 13 nights in 2 different countries.
Yeah.
And I was really proud of us because we nailed that tour. And, you know, I've said to my assistant, like, we need to look at what we did there and apply that to every tour we do going forward. Because at no point were we scrambling to like, oh, we need to get this. We were so locked in because there was no time for me to be like, oh, I forgot to do this. Like, you know, because we cook in Baltimore or Richmond the first night. We get up at 5 a.m. We drive to Baltimore. It's 3 hours. Get into the Airbnb, build the kitchen up, right? Like, you have to be very time oriented and scheduled, right, to make sure you're hitting those points.
Let me go back a little bit. When with the Airbnb, when you're selecting an Airbnb to host the dinner in, what are some of the things that you look for?
The kitchen.
Yeah. Obviously the kitchen. But what are you looking for specifically in the kitchen?
A couple things. One, a nice stove. Like, I don't want an induction top. I would prefer a gas top, something with a big island. I have 4 tickets for every dinner that are chef's table. So if I can find an island where I do my plating that has 4 bar stools or 4 chairs, and I can sit those 4 guests there. But I'm also looking for a large dining room table. Yeah. Right. Something with space, or a big open living room that I can go bring folding tables and chairs and set up.
What is the typical head count that you would look for to bring you to a city? At what point is it no longer like, hey, 8 people is just not enough?
Yeah. I mean, you know, my ticket price has been going up as I've been becoming more successful. Demand, right? So it's made, you know, being here right now, I'm only taking 12 people each night. Right, that was more of a choice, but I'm still coming out of this trip profitable. In the past, I would say I need 40 to 50 guests over 2 nights in an Airbnb, right, to make it, you know, profitable. Because things you got to think about.
You're doing 25 covers over 2 nights.
Yeah, or in one night. I'll do like 2 seatings, you know, like yesterday.
I didn't think about that. Like,
yesterday I did a 4 o'clock and a 7 o'clock, right? So I always aim, my service is 90 minutes, right? Whether I'm 50 people, I may run closer to 2 hours, but I always aim for that 90-minute service because, for one, I don't want to sit at a table longer than 2 hours myself. Given the ingredients we're serving people, you know, there's opportunity for someone to have a bad reaction, or, you know, I don't want that happening at the table. Right.
Do people have to sign a liability waiver or anything?
I did when I first started doing this, I had people signing waivers. That waiver would never have held in court. That was more someone signing something going, oh, I am responsible, I've signed this piece of paper, right? So it's more mental in their mind.
It makes
sense.
Because
in my emails I send out to people with the address, I'm like, here is the closest bus stop, here is the link for Uber. Like, I make sure people understand, like, don't be driving. Right? Like, you know, again, I'm taking all the risk and liability doing this. So, you know, if someone comes in and sits down and just blatantly puts their car keys down, I drove here in that, I'm not going to serve you cannabis.
Have you ever had to cut anyone off and say, hey, look, you've had enough?
Yeah, and that's the reason why I don't serve alcohol at my events. Once in Las Vegas, we had 4 guests show up during the first course, so they were late. I was already annoyed, and they all had drinks in their hand. I didn't want to let them in. Someone told me he was a very important buyer for a dispensary, had 14 locations. Okay, let's let him in. His girlfriend almost passed out in her food on the second course, so I kicked them all out because all my guests are in there, paid $250 for this dinner, and we've got some sloppy guests that are kind of taken away from the experience. So
does Airbnb, and again, because I've never done this, so for people that are listening that are thinking that maybe they want to do you know, pop-ups, which I'm kind of thinking like maybe I want to do a pop-up in an Airbnb. Does Airbnb ever have rules like you cannot have guests more
I mean,
or do you have to
most you'll see all Airbnbs will be like no parties, no guests, or nothing, right? And so I send, before I even try to book, I send that Airbnb owner a message, and I say, hi, my name's Travis. I am a traveling chef. I am coming to cook for clients in your city on these nights. I would like to host a dinner party between 6 and 8:30. So I give them everything up front, right? Then I say, please look at my reviews to see I've been doing this, right? So
how did you ever have to say like, and you're welcome to come?
So what I do is once I find an Airbnb in a city, I cut Airbnb out after that. I make friends with the owner because Airbnb is taking a cut. Right. And so I usually befriend the owner, right, and pay them directly. I'll offer sometimes, I'm renting expensive houses. So if I can trade a dinner for a discount, I'll do it.
Yeah, smart.
Right. And then, I want the owner to come, especially if it's a house I want to keep using. I want the owner to come in and see what's going on. So, they feel comfortable again having us back. So
for someone that is again thinking about maybe going into the private catering or traveling catering, how are the margins generally? Like pretty decent?
They're great. Once again, it's when I first started doing this, I wanted to have a new menu every 2 weeks, and you make these mistakes when you learn, like, when a band goes on tour, they're playing the same set list every night, every city.
Greatest hits.
Right? Greatest hits.
And you
current
album.
album.
Build a routine, you know how to do the dish.
Right.
In a good situation and a bad situation.
Absolutely. Right. You come up with, I have my speeches, I have my corny jokes.
Yeah.
Right? They're, I was laughing because I went for dinner the other night and I was just listening to the chef talk and like give his punchline jokes. And I was saying to the person next to me, like, he's said this 1,000,000 times.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And like, because even I get to the point now, I've done so many of these dinners, I'm like, I don't know how to change up my speech because I go through a lot of safety and rules and I try and make it light and funny and, but
this is a tangent. You know what I would do? This is free advice.
Yeah.
I would hire a comedian. Yeah. So like, hey, give me some new material. Come to the dinner, and then give me some new material. Like, I need some edgier jokes.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
well, we've even like one of the things I do is in Canada, I had a musician. She would travel with me, and she would play music during the events. Mm-hmm. We've done before where we included comedy. Yeah, right. Smart. So in between courses, he gets up, he tells some jokes. Right. Again, I think a lot of people are looking for an experience. Yeah. Right. Yeah, cannabis is my cuisine skill set,
right?
But a lot of people are coming because they're making new friends, because it's an experience, right? So no matter what type of food you're cooking, right, how can you make that an experience for your guests to want to come to?
And you're giving them the ability to share this on social media. You want them to spread the word.
I do. That first dinner I did in Canada during 420, when I had the 164 people come through my house, I had the local news station reach out, CTV, which is the Canadian CBS, right? And they're like, hey, can we do a story about this illegal thing you're doing out of your house? And I was like, yep. And so I went on the news and talked about what I was doing. And so I've never shied away from talking about what I do. I've gotten my hand slapped because of it, right? But I just... with no risk comes no reward, I guess, So I do take risk. I do push boundaries, but I implement so much safety into the experience that people feel comfortable coming. It's
when you're in a new city, like you're here in Austin. Do you have to also recruit some staff from like temp agencies and stuff like that?
Yeah. So
like
I use an app called InstaWork.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. Which can be hit or miss. That's how I found my assistant. And again, if I find a good worker, I keep them, right? Yeah. We can get rid of InstaWork. Hey, man, InstaWork's taking 30% of what I'm paying you when I come back, right? So I have people in cities that have worked for me in the past that work every time I go to Chicago or every time I come to Boston. The same people come out. And what's really happened over the last year and a bit is, young chefs and cooks, even old cooks and chefs, reaching out, hey, I think this is really cool. Can I just come stage? Can I come help? Right. So
it's a great opportunity for someone to learn this style of cooking. Yeah. It's not familiar to most people.
No. Yeah.
Now, just getting back to the labor piece, do you typically get service team and maybe a porter or something like that to help you clean up, or is
so I'll do.
Yeah. What does the brigade look like?
So again, it's all usually depending on the group size. 12 and under I can do by myself. Over 8, I'd like to have an assistant. Right. Once we get up near 20, I need 3 people. So I need a runner out front, 2 in the kitchen. Once we get over 20,
2 including you?
Myself and then 1 other. So so there'll be a total of 3 people.
Yeah.
Once we get over 20 people, right, I need a dishwasher.
Yeah.
Right. So I bring a dishwasher in. The nice thing with front of house, because we're not taking orders, because I don't have a bar that people are ordering drinks and stuff from, I only need food runners.
Yeah.
So 2 food runners usually.
So what do you do for beverage?
So I will make mocktails.
Okay.
So I actually got the book from the Avery called Zero, and it teaches you how to make all the tequila, vodka, rum with no alcohol in it. So I can then, last night I was serving this tequila margarita, The tequila's 12 ingredients. You sous vide it for an hour at 190, and it's delicious. It's awesome. And then I will add my cannabis into that, so we can now infuse our mocktails. But I just don't want to mix alcohol and cannabis together in my dinner. So
Why? What happens?
well, again, what I say to
Worst that could happen.
well, I mean, people when here's the thing, of 25,000 people who served through cannabis, I've never had one rude customer, one person not pay their bill, dip out, start a fight. Like, the cannabis crowd is the best crowd to serve.
Yeah, everyone's
right?
chill.
Just chill.
Yeah.
And we always laugh. If you make a mistake on dessert, they don't care, because they're just like, yeah, dessert. The munchies have kicked in, and they're just loving it, right? So, yeah.
So I want to ask about the whole idea of cooking with cannabis. It's completely foreign to me. Like, if you get I wouldn't even know how to make like cannabis butter. Like I'm joking, but I wouldn't know, like, am I overdosing? Is it too little? Is it not enough?
When I first started, I was using isolates. So when we look at extractions, there's two different forms. You've got isolates and you've got full spectrum.
Explain what isolates are. Yeah.
So isolates are when we isolate the cannabinoid, THC or CBD by itself. Usually you get it in a little tincture bottle. You can eye drop on top precisely, 10 milligrams, 15 milligrams. That's a great way to be 100% confident. However, anyone with a low tolerance, pure THC brings on anxiety, paranoia, not the greatest feelings. Full spectrum extractions are when we're working with all parts of the plant. So not just THC, but CBD, CBN, CBG, and what I'm most focused on.
I have no idea what any of those things are.
So those are all cannabinoids.
Yeah.
Right?
The only one I'm familiar with is like CBD, because, for pain or whatever, right?
Yeah, so here's the great thing is, that this plant has been forbidden forever, right? And now that it's becoming legal, we can actually study it a lot better than it has been, right? And so we're learning that there's more cannabinoids out there that, cannabinoids, THC gives you that high feeling, right? But sometimes when we use certain types of cannabis, it can make us creative or make us tired and sleepy. That's coming from the terpenes.
Okay.
So terpenes are not just the flavor and aroma of cannabis, but they're responsible for the effects that we feel when we use it. Terpenes are identically found in plants, fruits, and herbs, right? We use terpenes in everyday products like Mr. Clean, that pine smell you're getting.
Okay.
That's a terpene called pinene, and we find it in green garden herbs like oregano, basil, dill, parsley. A terpene by itself is just flavor and aroma. When you combine terpene with a cannabinoid, there's a thing called an entourage effect. So within our bodies, everyone has an endocannabinoid system, right? This is what's maintaining the central balance in our central nervous system. It helps our immune system when we get sick. We have these receptors, a CB1 receptor and a CB2 receptor, and that's what cannabinoids bind with when we're consuming cannabis that start to give us those feelings. When we have a terpene with a cannabinoid, it's called an entourage effect. And that gives us a specific sort of feeling, right? So that's why we've got these terms in cannabis, sativa and indica. Those refer more to the growth pattern of the plant, not what the industry has sold it as. They're there to categorize cannabis to people who are new to try and help sell it. So it's a little more in-depth and scientific. We're seeing in markets like California, consumers are shopping now based on terpenes, right? Everyone reacts differently to a certain blend of terpenes, right? Sure. So when you find out what terpene blend works best with your endocannabinoid system, it will change your experience with cannabis.
And I've noticed, so I had surgery once, and someone recommended I take some edibles to help me with the pain.
Yeah.
And I'd never really taken edibles before, so they gave me a brownie. I'm not going to eat the whole thing. I ate half. Nothing happened. So I'm going to eat the whole thing. And I was in outer space shortly.
Yeah.
And I like to explain to people, I think I sound traveled. Right. I heard sounds that were right here, and then I looked and they were way over there.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, and this is for no one's eyes but my own, is I started writing down everything I was experiencing because it was so weird. I was like, what is going on? And anyway, neither here nor there, but obviously it hits everyone different.
So I dose everyone individually based on their own tolerance level.
Yeah. So how do you
how do you figure that out?
Right. So I have a recommended dosing scale. So when the guests sit down, I have a bunch of rules. My 3 rules are no peer pressure.
Yeah.
If I catch you peer pressuring someone else into a dose you're not comfortable with, I won't serve you cannabis.
Okay.
I've served over 1,000 people their first cannabis experience. Okay. Right. People who've never touched the plant before. No switching seats because we assign a cannabis number to your chair. So guests start moving around. That's Russian roulette. It's their fault, whatever they eat.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So you say, and then I don't increase the dosage halfway through the dinner. No, whatever you decide to start with is what you get to the end, unless you want us to stop adding it. Right.
Okay.
So my 5-course menu, every course will have 1 infused component. As an example, my starter last night was a Big Mac egg roll.
Uh-huh.
I make infused Big Mac sauce.
Good, yeah. I want that now. Yeah. It sounds pretty good. It sounds pretty good.
Well,
Also,
I call it on the menu. We call it a pre-roll, right? It's your first bite of the night. We kind of play into it a little bit, but so I make that infused Big Mac sauce. I make it 4 times. I make it once with no cannabis. I make it once with a low amount, a medium, and a high, right? And I do that for every single course, right? So I use anywhere from 3 to 4 times more cannabis than the next Cannabis Chef. I have a lot left over at the end of the dinner, but I have to do that to give myself a wide range to be able to infuse people. After I go over the rules, I tell them I have a dosing scale that goes 1 to 5, right? However, if you know what your tolerance level is, tell me and I can dose that. So 1 is 5 milligrams of THC. That's for the entire dining experience. 2 is 10 milligrams, 3 is 25, 4 is 50, and 5 is 100. Now, anyone who's never had cannabis before, 2.5 milligrams of THC with 10 milligrams of CBD is what they need to be served. That CBD is actually going to help suppress a bit of that THC spike that brings on the anxiety and paranoia.
Yeah.
Right. I then kind of split it up throughout the menu. I don't go even, 10, 10, 10, 10 if you're 50, right? I want these waves. I want you to feel that first rush and then you kind of come back down. And then you kind of come back up again, and then you kind of go down. So we can really utilize the terpenes, not just from the cannabis, but from the plants, herbs, and fruits in our recipes to help accentuate those terpene reactions, right?
And is it ever a case where someone, thinks that they're a 3, but they're really a 1?
Yeah, I mean, I think most people come in and they can be a little nervous because they're sitting with strangers at the table and that. Yeah. I always say to people, hey, if you're humming and hawing between a 2 and a 3, go with the 2, and then you'll know next time I could have had more, as opposed to having too much and then, ruining the entire experience. Because the thing is, especially with someone who's new to it, if we green them out, if we overserve them cannabis, they'll probably never come back. Not just to me, but cannabis in general.
Green them out.
Yeah.
Is that the slang?
That's the slang. That's the term.
Green them out, yeah.
You got a blackout and you got a green out. So the green outs we want to avoid, right? So, we build a lot of steps ahead of time to make sure that we're minimizing opportunities for mistakes.
This is all fascinating to me. Yeah. Do you have to explain to people that sometimes, hey, like they're like, oh, I smoke weed all the time. Yeah, there's a difference from eating.
Yeah. And for one, I will never pick someone's dose. So as I go around and I personally take everyone's dose. I don't let a server do that. I do that. I smoke all the time, and I'm like, okay. And they're like, maybe I should be a 3 or a 4. And I'm like, I make sure that they're the ones who choose it, but I always guide them on the side of caution, right? Like, hey, you can always come back and have a little more, but it's always better to err on the side of caution. And that's why I have the no peer pressure rule, because you got a group of 4 guys that come in and someone is only 5 milligrams while all his buddies are chronics 100 milligrams each. And they're like, come on, right? And someone has to step in there and like save that person.
Without saying names. You probably get like a lot of athletes and celebrities showing up to your dinner.
Yeah.
Did Joey Diaz show up?
Oh, no. You got not yet. Hey, there's a reason I keep coming back to Austin. So I got a group I want to cook for out here.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, you're smart, right? They're all here. We got to promote that a little bit more. Get them in there. Do a private one for those guys, right?
Yeah.
So now that you have all this information and you're traveling, and I mean, clearly you know what the hell you're talking about. How are you making sure that this information is accessible to the everyday cook?
2022, I put out my first cookbook. It's called Introduction to Culinary Cannabis. I put Pretty
You
80
can get it
pages.
on Amazon.
Yeah, you can find it on Amazon.
I'm gonna get it.
About 80
Wish you would
pages.
have brought me one.
Yeah,
Where's my
oh, shit,
kit?
I know, right? Oh man. It is 80 pages of theory and then 44 recipes.
Yeah.
And those recipes are like a ginger.
How many
turmeric.
pages of theory?
80.
80 pages. Okay,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
a lot.
yeah.
So it's detailed.
It's detailed, right? Again, it's both for the home cook and the chef.
Did you have a background in this as
No.
far as education goes? So you're basically didactic learner.
Yeah. And, that cookbook, the response I got from it from people, reading reviews and stuff, and like finally something that really explained outside of how high can I get off with a brownie, right? Like,
Right.
how can I use this for other purposes?
Nothing wrong with the brownie.
No, nothing wrong with the brownie. Nothing wrong. I always say,
Do you have like a brownie recipe?
yeah, I did.
You have
I
to have
actually did a brownie.
recipe. Yeah, you got
In the cookbook, it's called High Maintenance Weed Brownie.
Yeah.
And it's gluten free, dairy free, nut free. Like it's just
Okay.
it's
So it's
kinda
good.
fun.
And it's delicious.
Yeah, and it's delicious. Yeah. So, so from the response from the cookbook, and just seeing where this was going, I felt no one had put any real education out there. I mean, there are some online courses and whatnot. So at the beginning of last year, I spent a couple months building an online course that was quite in depth. I launched it on Teachable. And then about halfway through the summer, I reached out to the American Culinary Federation because on their platform, they had a certificate for culinary cannabis, but no training. So to get their
That seems kind of fucked up.
so to get that certificate,
So how do you get the certificate without training?
because they would reference 4 books to read, and then they gave you a 100-question quiz, right? So I reached out to the American Culinary Federation. I said,
That's dangerous.
he said, hey, I read it almost was meant to be because I reached out. They had just recently brought on a new director.
Yeah.
He responded back to me. We got on the phone and he said, my top 3 priorities of coming into this role in year one of them was to create something for culinary cannabis. And you've just brought me a full turnkey program. So really proud and excited. The American Culinary Federation just licensed that for the next 2 years as their official prerequisite training course. This is a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
Right.
So now education is much more accessible
Yeah.
through American Culinary Federation. But if someone, is there an opportunity for the non-American Culinary Federation
Yeah,
members to get that education?
Yeah,
besides
so
the book?
anyone can get the book, and then for the class with the ACF, I think it's $195 for ACF members and $245 for non-members.
So you don't need to be a member.
You don't need to be a member.
Is it still on Teachable?
When this podcast comes live, no.
Okay.
So I've kind of taken off Teachable. I've given them full licensing for the U.S. and America, and I'm now looking at taking the course over to Germany. Germany's just legalized cannabis.
So is it not on Teachable in the U.S. but in other?
Right now it's not on Teachable or anywhere else, right?
Anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Right.
I think what I want to do is look out to these governing bodies, right, and kind of approach them and like, hey, this cuisine is not a fad; it is coming. We're still a long ways away from a restaurant being able to serve it, but if there's any profession that can take something and dial it into being safe, enjoyable, it's chefs. We are so meticulous and particular. Like,
Yeah.
if I'm serving cheeseburgers, I want it to be the best cheeseburger you've ever had, and I want you to come back.
So you're focusing not just on the experience with the cannabis, but also on the quality of food, the service,
Yes.
everything. You
Yeah.
have to.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. So, it's if someone comes to one of my dinners and gets sick from cannabis, it hurts, right? And I don't want anyone to go through that experience, right? So, I developed a safety protocol to minimize opportunities where mistakes can come up. I know these mistakes come up because I've done it a million times. Not the mistakes, but I've been doing this now for 7 years. I know where the pitfalls come. When you're using InstaWork to bring staff on, these staff front house runners they don't know it's a cannabis dinner usually till they get there, right? So you have to make sure they understand what's going on. Table number, seat number, like that is more. You really look at this. Every single guest has an allergy,
yeah.
right? That's what it is.
And then on top of that, you might have guests with allergies.
Yes, and then you have guests with allergies. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Is there seed oils in that?
Yeah.
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 Wild. So I have a question.
Yeah.
Here in Texas, Cannabis is not legal in Austin. It's
Decriminalized.
yeah, decriminalized.
Yeah.
But you could pretty much go to. I mean, like I go to the gas station and they're selling joints and
Yeah, but
selling,
that's THCA. That's hemp products.
so
right?
from what I understand,
Yeah.
that THCA, and correct me if I'm wrong, THCA is just it hasn't been heat treated.
Correct.
So what's going on here? Like, is that a loophole in the system? It's the same.
Yeah,
stuff?
it was a loophole because they said, they were going to allow people to be able to purchase hemp products because hemp didn't have enough THC in it. They found a way to pull THC out of hemp, right, through this process of THCA. I don't fully understand what they're doing with the hemp plant, but I know with a lot of these THCA products, they are adding stuff. They're adding botanical terpenes. I mean, if you're smoking one of those hemp joints and it tastes like strawberry, that's not natural. Right. And so I don't cook and
Tastes
work
like cupcake. That's
right. I don't cook and work with hemp products. Right. I'm a sort of naturalist in that sense. I mean, 70% of the time I work with flour over concentrates. If I'm going to create extractions with concentrates, it has to be a live resin that is natural cannabis derived terpenes in it. I don't use products that have botanical terpenes added in. And,
Do you have a source that you go to, like the gold standard of tinctures and
well,
extracts? And
to where I'm at now, cannabis brands actually pay me to use their cannabis. So I mean, I'm a cannabis snob. I can say that. I'm a connoisseur, but I'm also like I only smoke certain things.
yeah.
Right.
What do you smoke?
There's a brand called Alien Labs.
Alien Labs.
Yeah. So
Where
they're
is that?
California, Arizona, Florida, and then another brand up in Boston or in Massachusetts called Laced. So those two brands right there, that's what I'm going to consume and use. When it comes time to cooking, it's more about, what's the experience I'm looking to build? Because I'm going to be shopping on terpene profiles. There are a lot of brands out there that put out cannabis with very low terpene percentages, right? So the natural sort of way to go create an extraction is this process of decarboxylation, where you chop your flour up, you put it in an oven at 245 Fahrenheit for 40 minutes. That converts the THCA into THC. Two things. One, I would never put cannabis in an oven. So I use a sous vide to make all my extractions.
Right. And does that still, does the decarboxylation still happen with the sous vide machine?
Correct. Yeah, because you would vac seal your flour and then weight it and drop it in the sous vide bath.
So it's a matter of bringing it up to a certain temperature.
Correct.
Not
Another sort of
toasting it.
old myth that I want broken is this going up to 240 degrees. I actually have a limit of 200 Fahrenheit. Because anytime we start going over...
You said what again?
200 Fahrenheit.
200, okay.
Right? Because anytime we start going over 200, with any green garden herb, we'll start to brown it, right? That green goes to brown. And the more heat you apply, the more chlorophyll you pull off the plant. So if you bite into the weed brownie and you taste a bitter, weedy bite, it's had too much heat applied to it, right? 70% of the time, I'm using a method called the Cedeno method, where I actually add my flour directly to my fat. So I skip that decarboxylation process. Now we're still going to have decarboxylation because it's more of a passive decarb that's happening within the fat, right? The Cedeno method is about 25% less potent than the decarb method, but it's more terpene rich. It's more palatable. It's more aromatic, right? So this process of, low and slow, kind of taking that thought process on how we're making our extractions as well. So lowering the heat a little bit, going at a little bit longer of a time, we'll create these extractions, again, that are more focused on the terpenes. So if I have a high grade of flour like Alien Labs, I'm never going to decarb that, right? I'm going to do the Cedeno method because that farmer went to so much trouble to make this beautiful terpene-rich flour. I don't want to go blast it with a bunch of heat and sacrifice all that work just for the THC. I can go get a low grade of flour, trim, shake, bottom of the barrel, that kind of stuff. And just, that's good for THC. So that I will decarb and then, pull as much THC out of that as possible. But, more times than not, again, I'm focused on flavor, taste. So I want to take this different method.
And I should have asked this question earlier, but my chef food cost brain is going. Yeah. How much does cooking with cannabis increase the food cost?
It doesn't.
It doesn't.
It does. I mean, let's just say I don't have sponsors that aren't giving me the flour. You know, and again, what kind of grade of flour do you want to?
Right.
Do you want to go to Walmart or do you want to go to Whole Foods?
Well, I know something that you would use.
Yeah. So I mean, I would go out. An ounce of Alien Lab flour will give me. Once I'm done my whole extraction process, it could give me about 3,500 milligrams, which would be more than enough for one dinner.
Okay, so roughly an ounce is going to give you enough to cover.
Yeah, an ounce of flour.
5 people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, and then, but now again, because I have multiple courses and I'm different tastes and flavors, I'm using different batches. So,
do you infuse different fats? Like have you
yes,
like duck fat, tallow?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, we can infuse salt, sugars, and spices.
Oh.
Right.
How do you infuse salt and sugars?
You would infuse alcohol, and then in a dehydrator, like let's say a Malden salt.
Yeah.
Right. So I infuse a vodka, or I wouldn't use vodka. I'm forgetting the name of the type of alcohol we use here. But I would take that infused alcohol, I would pour it on my bed of salt, put it in the dehydrator for 8 hours, evaporate all the alcohol, the cannabinoids then transfer into the salt. Now that salt is the most fragile form of extraction. So you can't then take that salt and throw it in your sauce to season it. You'll season it, but you will lose all the cannabis, right?
So it's like a finishing salt.
It's a finishing salt. Same if I infuse Cajun spice, right? I'm going to take my chicken breast, I'm going to coat it with non-infused Cajun spice, barbecue it, take it off the grill, let it sit and rest, and then take my cannabis Cajun spice and apply it back on top.
So again, I don't know how to cook with cannabis, but I'm just thinking, let's say you had a piece of steak and you cut it and you open it up and you could brush it with cannabis-infused beef tallow and then sprinkle it with a Maldon infused salt.
Yeah.
And would that be enough?
Correct. Yeah. It's when we start adding heat, right? Again, as we get terpenes have an evaporation point of anywhere mid 200s to up to 400 Fahrenheit, right? So the same with cannabinoids. Once we start applying too much heat to it, right, we're going to burn away what we have. I got to be 100% confident in every extraction I'm serving. So at any point, if I have any doubt in what I'm making, it goes into the personal bin for myself, but I can't go and serve that to people, right? So temperature is extremely important to, you know, at what point, let's just say I'm going to
cover all that in your book, all the different temperatures and how to infuse different methods?
The different fats you can use, the different methods.
Yeah,
right?
so for someone that's interested, go get the book.
Yeah,
you'll cover. I'm thinking about. I mean, I don't smoke weed. I smoke cigars. Like I enjoy a good cigar, but it's different, right?
Yeah.
Cigars, weed. Yeah. So I wouldn't even know where to begin if I went to one of your. I'd say start me at like a half.
Yeah.
Like not even at one. Like I don't.
No, that's where I would start you.
Yeah. Do you ever get pushback from either chefs or just people in general? Like this is, there's people out there like, what? How dare you?
I mean, it's I've had news coverage out there before, and I go and look at the comments, which you're not supposed to do, and some people are like, these weed people are, you just can't smoke it. They got to put it in everything, right? And,
right.
Hey, to each your own. This isn't a dining experience. This is a dining experience that is, similar to going for a wine pairing or a whiskey pairing,
it's not
right?
For everybody.
It's not for everyone.
Yeah.
That's why I've got these rules of no peer pressure. I have couples that will come to the dinner where one person doesn't consume and one does, but they can sit there and get the same food as everyone else, right? So there's, again, no peer pressure to make anyone ever try this if they don't want to.
So I know we've talked, and you had mentioned that you didn't go to culinary school.
No,
do you ever get pushback from like the culinary community, and at least early on? Like,
I mean, that's why my brand's called the Nomad Cook and not the Nomad Chef.
Yeah.
So I got my start because I got onto MasterChef, eliminated very quickly right away.
Canada, right?
Yeah. So I got eliminated on the second episode. So I was like,
they fucked up. They should have kept you
right.
on. It's like TV gold, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I know. So I went back. I worked in the oil and gas industry for 12 years. I was a business development manager for a large oil company, and I got laid off 3 weeks after filming, given a 1-year severance package. I was 31, and I was like, okay, you know what? Let's try this chef thing out.
Yeah.
And so I originally was going to be the Nomad Chef, and I had a bunch of chefs be like, you're not a fucking chef.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I said, fair enough. Okay, I'm the Nomad Cook, right? I had imposter syndrome. I still get it. I mean,
how long have you been doing this though?
8 years.
I mean, you probably know more about running a private catering and chefing than some people with diplomas and
but I
some
mean,
real chefs.
you know,
what
so
I mean? I don't. For me personally, I don't see it.
Yeah, no, I think having those feelings is natural, and if you don't, right, you've got some narcissism going on, maybe. Yeah. You know, I was it last year I got to cook at the Soho House in Paris.
Yeah.
I thought it was a pop-up. An hour before this service, I found out it was a restaurant takeover.
Yeah.
And they were going to have me run expo with 6 chefs doing my. I've never worked in a restaurant.
Yeah.
I was terrified, and then I just said to myself, like, "Fuck it, we're in it."
Yeah.
Right, let's go. We did 103 covers in 3 hours, and it was one of the proudest moments of my life. I walked out. I was like, I couldn't believe we did it. So, you know,
have you ever partnered with other chefs?
Oh yeah,
like guest chef. Yep. Just making this.
So you know, before the whole cannabis, for the first 2 years of me doing the Nomad Cook, before I started with cannabis, what I was actually doing was reaching out to people from Top Chef in the U.S.
Yeah.
The very first person, Sylvia Barban, I said, "Hey, I'd like to bring you up to Canada, put on 3 dinners for you. I'll promote it, sell it, fill the room, but I'd like to work with you." Mm-hmm. Right? So that's what I did in my first couple of years is I took my business and sales background, I applied it. I knew how to go out and sell tickets and stuff.
Yeah.
But I would bring these chefs up and I would work with them, right? And whatever their menu, I'm just there in the kitchen to learn.
Yeah. Smart, by the way.
Yeah. And, you know, it's what really funny is, you know, 5 years after that, all of a sudden those chefs are, "Hey, can I come and do a cannabis dinner with you?"
Yeah, it's wild. Is there a chef out there that you would love to? Normally I would ask this question at the end. I'd say, like, who's your Mount Rushmore of chefs? But if I asked you, like, who are the 4 chefs that you would love to collaborate with on a dinner?
Eric Ripert.
Yeah.
So he's
good luck,
right? No, I know. Hey, these are ones. I mean, you know, Rob Gentili. So
who's Rob Gentili?
Rob Gentili is a famous Canadian chef who's now in West Hollywood. He's got a restaurant called Stella.
Have you reached out?
You know what? He has been one of the most amazing people I've connected with through culinary because I consistently I didn't have a real mentor, right? I never worked in a kitchen. I have some chefs that I can lean on for advice. I've met him a handful of times. He's actually come to one of my dinners now. But, you know, at first he always took the time to respond, answer, right? Which I always was so grateful for because he didn't have to do that.
Yeah, good man.
You know, so would love to collaborate with him. You know, one of the reasons I keep coming back to Austin, Chef Philip from Scratch and Pasta Bar, Philip Franklin Lee, would love to collaborate and work with him and do a cannabis sushi dinner. I think would be really cool.
Yeah, I had Dan Kennedy on.
Yeah. He was at dinner last night. So
he's a good dude.
So you know, I'm a very persistent person when I set a goal on something, and I'm trying to how can I connect with these chefs, right, and come across and do that. So the coolest thing about being a chef, I think, is getting to collaborate with other chefs. Those are the most fun events that we do. So, you know, I've got a chef who's working with me now, Chef Jayon Smith. He was on Hell's Kitchen. He works for the Kansas City Chiefs, but he's taking over about 70% of my tours this year while I focus on the education.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. I mean, you're on the road all the time. Like, how do you personally recharge? Like, how do you deal with your own potential burnout, if you even face burnout?
Oh, the burnout is intense to the point where there's been times at the end of last year and the year before when I was like, do I want to keep doing this?
Yeah.
Right.
So what do you smoke a joint? Eat some apples?
You know what I found was, and so, you know, last year I did 184 dinners. At the end of it, I was just wiped, you know, and I took 3 weeks off.
What'd you do?
Right. I just chilled at home. I went to the gym, you know, I cooked dinner for us, which I don't do a lot anymore, which I think most chefs can. You know, when I say us, I mean my wife and I, right?
Yeah.
You know, you don't cook at home anymore. It's so easy to just Uber Eat something, or when I do cook, let's just get steak. You know, what's quick and easy? But
eggs.
You know, I started, you know, for 5 nights in a row, I went back to the dishes I was cooking, you know, before I became a chef, and you know, what are some fun at-home dinners we can have, and
So it's basically getting back, recharge, take some time away, disconnect.
Don't travel, right?
Yeah.
So
for other people, it's travel. For you, it's
for
don't
me,
travel.
it's like stay at home. And I went to a basketball game, just go do some stuff because, everyone's always like, oh, the road must be amazing. I'm like, it is, but every city is just another Airbnb to me because I'm not going out and seeing the city. I make a very strong effort to go get lunch somewhere in every city. So, for a while I was looking for that local hole in the wall. I've got to eat at some amazing places, getting to do this. And I've got a list of places I want to go eat at.
A bunch of amazing people all along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm very fascinated about what you do. I'm curious about the name, the Nomad Cook. You had said the cook reason, but it's like the nomad reason. It's like because you're a fan of the nomad step people?
No, kind of, but I mean a nomad in the sense of I've always been traveling around. I lived in Australia for a year. I lived in Europe for a year. I up and left BC and went to Alberta. I lived in Toronto for a couple months. So I've always been nomadic in the sense of moving around, right? And, I always thought if comedians and bands can tour, why couldn't a chef?
Yeah, I mean, it's smart. It's funny. I had predicted in my 2024 trends as like basically what you're doing. I said there's a lot more chefs doing this now because they want to get away from the brick and mortar model. It's more profitable. Sometimes it's you don't have the stress of working at close because you're always open basically as long as you want to be open. So I think what you're doing is incredible. I've also noticed there's a lot of really talented chefs doing this. Where before I don't think there was as many.
It would have been really hard to do. I mean, social media now gives you the opportunity to do that. And I mean, even to put a pop-up together before in the past, how are you going to advertise that? Right. And now anyone can do that. I had a chef come and help me yesterday. He works at the Soho House here in Austin. And, he's like, I'd really like to do a pop-up. Right. No, I just don't know. At the end of my dinner, I said to everyone there, hi, everyone, Chef Josh here is going to do a pop-up sometime in the next 3 months. I'm going to email you all and tell you when he's going to do it. And, and he said to me the night, he's like, you kind of just pushed me into doing this. And I'm really glad you did.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
Do you have an email list that you send out to everyone too? You collect emails?
Yeah. So I collect emails. All past guests get notified first when we're coming back into a city.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say the Nomad. I'm a big fan of like Genghis Khan.
Yeah.
So right now I'm listening to the Genghis Khan audiobook. It's great.
By Dan Carlin, the hardcore history.
No.
The actual
the
book.
hardcore history, by the way, I think is arguably maybe the greatest podcast series ever done. Hardcore history.
That's what got me into podcasts.
Wrath of the Khans.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Amazing. I'm a huge history nerd, so And being on the road, taking lots of flights, lots of long drives, podcasts became instrumental into passing the time. And, for me, it was like, man, I'm getting a university education here. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. The smartest people in the world have podcasts, myself included. Also the dumbest people in the world, myself included. Right. But a podcast makes everything's so much more accessible. But the Wrath of the Khans one, for people that haven't listened to that one, honestly, it's intense.
Yeah.
He's one of the greatest storytellers ever.
He is. And I love it because he's like, I'm not a historian. I'm just a fan of history. Yeah. Right. And he always kind of starts it off that way. And, I knew who Genghis Khan was, but I never really dived into the story of it. Yeah. And man, it is so fascinating. But it's also, you watched, like anything in life, he started from nothing. He built this empire. It gets passed down to his kid, to the next one, to the next one. And by the fourth generation, it separates. Right. Because of the infighting and that.
Well, he unified all the nomadic tribes. Yeah. Right. Under him. And right now I'm listening to his the audiobook of Genghis Khan.
Yeah.
But the reason I'm listening to it is because I was so fascinated after, I had listened to the 4-part series on Wrath of the Khans. It's hard to find now, but it's honestly one of the best. What's interesting is, there's so much like metaphor, like he was born clutching a blood clot, he kills his brother. Like it's the story as old as time of someone that's just going to turn into, a world conqueror. But I love history as well. Yeah. Another great one, I mean, I could read about Julius Caesar, but Alexander the Great is also someone that I find extremely fascinating.
Yeah.
Just because one of the things that I've noticed about great leaders is they all have a certain belief that they are like almost chosen.
Right. Yeah.
And one of the interesting things when you read Alexander the Great's, the biography on him and his story, is that he would go with, like when he was in Egypt, or where he would always want to consult with the oracle, because his mother would tell him, King Philip's not your real father.
Right.
You're the son of Zeus. You're the son of Zeus, right? And so as he would go from consult the oracle and be like, who's my dad? Like he was still unsure. Is it Zeus or is it this guy? And of course the oracles were afraid, like if I tell him the wrong thing, he's gonna kill me. So, it's Zeus. Yeah. Right. So he thought he had this belief that he was unstoppable. So he kept conquering due to that belief. And you see that in Genghis Khan. You see that in a lot of
I am super fascinated with the Tudor era in English history, like King Henry VIII. Right? Like, again, he had the belief of like, no, the Pope's not going to tell me what I can do and what I can't do. Like, fine, I'm going to start my own church, right? And just another thing too, it's all of these leaders were very ruthless.
They were.
Right? Very ruthless. And it's,
but the thing is, I think all leaders are very ruthless. They are. It's just, I think nowadays we know how to hide.
Well,
it's not,
and that's how Dan Carlin
frame it differently.
That's how Dan Carlin starts off the Wrath of the Khans. We do this now with Genghis Khan, and Genghis Khan killed 15% of the world's population when he was alive, right? Time seems to forgive, and then all of a sudden you come up with stories and stuff. So, it's there is this ruthlessness that
history, as they say, it rhymes.
Yeah,
it rhymes, and you could almost see the same story, like Julius Caesar is very similar to Alexander the Great, very, very similar to Xerxes, very similar. They all have very similar stories on them. I'm fascinated by history, and for people that are listening, go listen to the Wrath of the Dan Carlin. I mean, he's got, I think, another one called King of Kings.
Yes, King of Kings. He's done 80 of them now. Right now, he's actually doing Alexander the Great.
Is he?
So yes,
okay.
There's two 3.5-hour episodes already now on that one.
I need to go back and listen to this.
For me, that's my I must have if you look at my audio folder, audiobooks, there's over 200 books in there, and like that's how I actually like to go to bed. Is to put on a history podcast. Even with a monotone reader reading it out, because it helps me go to sleep, and then I'm like, maybe I'm still learning while I'm sleeping because it's still going.
Like we're rolling around. Yeah. Well, Chef, we're going to wrap up, but if you had a bit of advice that you were going to give to an up and coming cook, what would that advice look like?
Take every opportunity to go and stage and get in kitchens with chefs. Right. Go there. Do anything and everything that's being asked of you. Don't go in there trying to show off or I know this or I worked here. Just go in there and you will be appreciated and opportunities will come out of that. Right. And then also, like I always say, don't be afraid to fail. Yeah. Right. Don't be afraid to do a pop-up that only 6 people buy tickets for. Right. You got to start somewhere, and you're going to learn from every mistake that comes through you, right? So I think and
stages are a hot topic, and we could probably talk about that at length, because a lot of people are like, you shouldn't do unpaid stages, and other people are like, but I want to learn. It's a hot topic. My take on it is it's not a one-size-fits-all answer.
No,
Sometimes if a restaurant is using the stage as free labor is one thing, but it's another thing is like, hey, I don't need you here. You want to learn from me. Like there has to be some.
That's exactly it.
Because you want to learn from me.
If someone reached out, hey, can I come and help you in this city? Sure. You know what? If you come out and you're awesome when you ask to come and volunteer, I will make sure that I'm calling you back next time. You're getting paid. I also tip everyone in weed at the end of the night. I'm not going to lie. So usually the chefs are pretty happy leaving no matter what.
Because I can't. What is it? Big Mac sauce in their head?
No, I'll wrap it up with this one. Is when I was in London last November at the Soho House doing a dinner, I made my extraction in a vac sealed bag. I took the oil out, so there was still residue inside the bag, and I was about to throw it out. And the chef said, "Whoa, what are you doing with that bag?" I was like, "Nothing." He's like, "Give it to me." He took it. He cut it into 8s, and all the chefs opened it and started licking. I was like, all right, chef life.
Where can people find you, Chef?
You can find me on Instagram, _Nomad Cook.
Yeah.
or the nomadcook.com is my website. But follow me on Instagram is where you will see everything that I'm doing. That is usually the most up to date. The American Culinary Federation licensing out or launching out the program that you can find on their website.
And if people want to get the book?
You can either come directly to me, send you out a signed copy, or look on Amazon, and they can get you that book right away.
Awesome. So good luck with your dinner tonight.
Hey, appreciate it.
We'll have to have you back. Awesome, brother.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the show. You know what to do if you're watching on YouTube. Hit the like and subscribe button. If you're listening on Spotify or anywhere else, make sure you leave 5 stars. Nothing less than 5 stars. 5-star podcast only. Go to chefspsa.com where you get everything, including exploring the new Chef's PSA merch store. We'll see you next week. Hit the porno music.
No, it's André in the kitchen, mixing, dropping chef knowledge, no fiction, stirring up the beats, heating up the session. Listen close, class is in session.